are live.
All right, welcome back to the House Judiciary Committee this Thursday afternoon. We're continuing to take testimony on S-193, and we'll invite the DMH representative, Karen Barth. Thank you very much. Let's identify yourself for the record and proceed.
So good afternoon. My name is Karen Barber. I'm General Counsel for the Department of Mental Health. And I know I was in here a lot earlier this session, but just briefly, because I don't know many of you, I've been General Counsel of DMH since 2014. And I've worked on forensics for over a decade, most of that time. So I have a lot of knowledge and institutional history of the project. So
And scars, like
I'm going to say positive. So thank you for having me here today. I wanted to leave time for lots of questions, but I did just want to kind of go over a few things. First, the administration and AHS strongly support this bill. There absolutely is a gap in the system. It's a human services gap, not a DMH gap. And there are real public safety consequences if no action is taken. We've seen them already, and they will continue to happen if we don't have some sort of system. The reality is that some people just can't be served in the community. The majority of DMH's budget goes to provide services in the community. That is our focus. We always try to serve people in the least restrictive setting. It is not always possible. And Dale has individuals that they don't have any lock settings. So DMH is the only department other than DOC that has any type of lock settings. And our lock settings are hospitals, and they're fairly restrictive in terms of who can go there. And I'll get into that. But again, the most of what we do is provide services in the community. Dale only has community-based services. Substance use under VDH only has community-based services. So there is a gap because there are folks that need secure settings, and there are no settings currently that can serve them. I also want to stress, before I get into some of the details, that this isn't the end of the conversation. We will be back in front of the legislature next year if you pass the bill, because this is really just asking for the authority of how someone gets in and how someone gets out, and the parameters within which you have made a policy decision of that we can. There are a lot of questions about what it's specifically going to look like. Where is it going to be? We don't have answers to those yet because we don't know who we're going to have the ability to serve. And so there is a report due in October, and there's rulemaking required, and we're going to have a budget act. So this is not the end of the conversation. We'll have plenty of time to come back in with particulars, but really what we need before we can give you those particulars is to know what you want us to do. And so I just want to say that because I think a lot of the questions we're getting are very specific and just things we can't answer yet, but that we look forward to answering. And then I wanted to just touch a little bit on, with all due respect to Matt Valerio, I think he's a great attorney and does a great job. We disagree a bit with some of the things he said. And so I wanted to clarify from our perspective, kind of some of the issues as we see them. Why is this not a DMH thing? Because these aren't just DMH individuals. Contrary to what he said, which I'm guessing maybe he meant it in the broader sense, people can and are found incompetent all the time for reasons other than mental illness. This is not just DMH, and that's why it can't be a DMH solution. It could be substance use. We see a lot of substance use. Could be TBI, could be dementia, could be intellectual developmental disabilities. You heard Jared yesterday talk about sign language, right? There are lots of reasons. Being incompetent is a legal standard. It's not a clinical standard. There's no like particular diagnoses that you have to become incompetent. It's just, can you participate? But that's it. That's the bare minimum, right? And there are lots of reasons why. And so we do everyone a disservice when we make it only about mental illness, because again, we're losing people through the gap, and we're seeing that. The high profile cases you see and the frustration around them not being in a locked facility, people aren't in our hospital system when they don't belong in our hospital system. And that's the reality. It's not about a shortage of beds. It's not about money. It's that we have a system where you have to meet clinical criteria to go to the hospital. And when people don't, that's where the gaps are, because there is no other locked setting for them. And again, some people need a locked setting. Our standard, and I think, I can't remember who asked this question, but someone was getting about it around public safety. Our standard that DMH looks at is danger to self or others due to mental illness. And that's the key, right? It's not about public safety. It is about, due to someone's mental illness, are they a danger to self or others? Those are very different things. And someone can have a mental illness and be dangerous for other reasons, right? Someone can be treated and remain dangerous. Someone cannot have a mental illness and be very dangerous. So again, it's much more nuanced than just trying to say it's mental health. It's much more complicated than that. And also a lot of people have co-occurring, right? We see a lot of substance use, mental health, or mental health and intellectual disabilities, or a TBI and substance use, right? Like these are complicated folks. And I also hear a lot about, well, should we be serving them in separate settings? Is it okay to mix them? They are mixed now, right? We serve people wherever they're at because there's lots of things going on in the hospital. We have folks, to be in the hospital, your primary diagnosis has to be a mental illness, right? But it doesn't mean they're not struggling with lots of other things. These folks are all together anyway. And so it's not about trying to tease out specific populations, about how do you meet their treatment needs as a whole. We did not have a forensic facility in the past. The Vermont State Hospital was not a forensic facility. It did not meet this need. I think if you had gone back 20 years or however long ago it flooded, 10, 15 years, you would have heard people talking about the same things and expressing frustration. It is frankly somewhat surprising to DMH now that people tend to talk very positively about the Vermont State Hospital. It lost its certification. It was not providing great care, right? It was not a model facility. We do not want to go back to those days. And I think we heard too that there's less beds since Waterbury. That's not true. Actually, there are more hospital beds in the system since the state hospital, but we decentralized it, right? So we do have VPCH, and that's the state-run hospital, but there's other hospitals around the state, including Rutland, Brattleboro, UVM, the veterans, and they all have beds. And so it's not that we have less beds just because VPCH is smaller, it's that we have a more diverse system. And that's important because we have two standalone psychiatric facilities, VPCH and Brattleboro Retreat. But then we also have units in medical hospitals. And that's important because a lot of people have co-occurring medical issues and need access to a medical facility. So again, it's not as easy as just saying it's mental health and we'll put them in a mental health hospital. There's a lot of complicating factors. About our inpatient system. So all of our hospitals are CMS certified and Joint Commission accredited. So what does that mean? That means that there are very high clinical standards that they have to meet in order to admit someone. And that's important, right? We want to make sure that people are actually needing to be in that high level of care. It is no different than a medical issue. So you go to the emergency room, you've broken your leg, you think it would be a lot easier if you could be inpatient because you'd get better care. But the ED says, nope, you don't need it. We'll do surgery on an outpatient basis. You can be served on outpatient. It's the same for mental health. If you can be served on an outpatient basis, that is where you will be served. Just because you have a mental illness does not mean you get to go to the hospital or that you need to go to the hospital. And so again, when we're looking at whether or not someone, say, goes on an OH or ONH, if they have a mental illness that does meet the level of danger to self or others due to mental illness, that decision is based clinically on, do they need to go to the hospital or can they be served in the community? And on ONHs, we pretty strongly disagree with some of the things we've heard about ONHs. ONHs are a treatment tool, right? They are the black robe effect for those of you who are lawyers, right? The idea is that a judge is telling you you have to do something and you might be more willing to do it. They are not punishment. It is not probation or parole. You don't get punished for not engaging in mental health treatment. And that's important because if you want people to successfully manage in the community, they have to be willing to do it, right? On some level, you can only force people for so long. They need to want to engage in treatment. And so the idea is that this is a tool to help them transition to the community and get that help, get that oversight. There absolutely is oversight over every single individual on an ONH. We have a care management team at DMH, and that is their job. They check in with designated agencies weekly, bi-weekly, monthly, depending on how many that the agency has. And any other time that if someone comes up in the news or someone is missing appointments, we are constantly checking in. The difference is, and I know it was interesting because there was a comment about how, ONHs are about treatment, but probation and parole is about compliance. But what people seem to really want out of ONHs is compliance. And that's the problem, right? If someone doesn't take their medication, it doesn't mean they need hospital level of care, which if you revoke an ONH, that's really the only option, right? Is to send them to the hospital, but you can't send them to the hospital if they don't need it. So treatment teams work very hard to meet them where they're at. The goal is not strict compliance. It could be that someone maybe can manage without their medications and do it fairly safely in the community, right? The goal is that they're doing what they need to do to manage safely. And that's what an ONH is. It's a treatment tool. It is not punishment. And so that's the difference. And part of the reason why this bill has the ability to put conditions on release is to factor into that public safety part of it, right? A lot of people get frustrated because they want to put in ONHs things that are more public safety focused, right? Don't go within 100 feet of someone. Don't commit any new crimes. Don't drive your car, right? Like those are things that are not mental health focused, and the DA is not going to oversee them. They can't. And so that is a gap, right? People want that. There is an important part about having accountability in the community for some folks. And so this path would allow us to do that. I think it's really important to remember that, again, we're only talking about a very small group of people. We're only talking about people who have been accused of committing the most serious offenses. And the court has found that they are a danger to the public and can't be served in a less restrictive setting. There's due process built into every part of this bill. And I think we heard a statement about people don't just walk out the door. Well, they do, because if they don't meet standard to be in our custody and they don't meet the standards to be in Dale custody, there is no other custody. And we do see instances where individuals are found not competent or are found not guilty by reason of insanity, don't meet our criteria, and just go into the community without any sort of supervision, because there is no system to catch those people. And we have seen negative outcomes from that, and we do need to address that. And that's not, you can't just try to slap an ONH on someone and expect it to solve that problem, because it's not going to solve the problem. And so we're really trying to focus on that small gap. And the last thing I wanted to touch on that Matt said was about the risk assessments. So we do believe that they are the appropriate thing. Risk assessments are clinical tools. But the great thing about them is they're not limited to just mental health, right? It's whatever your issue is. They're looking at that and looking at your likelihood of reoffending. So they look at what treatment plans are needed, what supervision levels are needed, and what safety plans are needed to try to allow people to return to a community. And so those are, DAs sometimes use them now. When we have really complicated folks discharging from the hospital, sometimes a DA will get a risk assessment so they know that they can plan for what they need. These are clinical tools. They're done by professionals, and they are appropriate because I think, I'm not sure who said it, but someone talked about a red herring. I do think the focus on mental illness is a bit of a red herring because, again, that's not what this is about. The bill specifically exempts people who meet hospitalization level of care. If you need to be in the hospital, we want you to be in the hospital. That's absolutely where you should be. This bill is for people who do not fit into our system. This isn't a hypothetical. This happens now. These people exist now. We're not trying to create something. I think to Jared's point about if you build it, they will come. This is already a problem. We have spent as an administration years coming in front of the legislature and acknowledging that there is a gap between human services and public safety. And we have proposed different ideas about how to address it. This is the most narrowly tailored one we've ever presented. And I'm hoping that that will get traction, because what we've really done is tried to hear all the feedback about the concerns, and they are valid concerns, right? We get it. We don't want to just lock someone away forever. Our goal always is to serve people in the community in the least restrictive settings. And The reality is, again, that that's not always possible. And so we've tried to really target this to a very small population, only the most serious crimes. And we've looked at best practices. There were a couple national groups that did some work on competency restoration and forensic systems. We looked at what they recommended, and we really tried to take that into account. One was only focus on cases with the most compelling state interest, hence the most serious crimes, and couple competency restoration with treatment. Competency restoration, again, because it's not clinical, it's really just, can you participate in your trial? And so some states, that's all you're doing. You're learning what a judge is, you're learning what your attorney is, and then you're restored. We're saying we don't want that. We want people to be successful. And so we want to couple services and competency restoration and be able to consider public safety. Were you saying?
No,
Sorry. Oh, okay. Oh,
Karen has.
I wanted you to finish.
no, that was my last point.
Thank you. Appreciate it. There are two things that I didn't hear you mention. One of them was, how did the Vermont State Hospital solve it? And I think you made it clear. It did not solve this problem. It was not a forensic facility.
No.
But my other question along those lines, right now, are there any places where folks can get restoration?
Not in Vermont, no.
Not in Vermont.
No.
And with this, we would have a way for that. My other question was around, and this is something the Defender General brought up. I'm not going to remember which section, but I bet you probably know that, of how people can be stuck in the system. And he's like, there needs to be a way out. You can't just be stuck there forever. And it seemed like civil commitment was a potential that he brought up. I'm curious your thoughts on that. Do you not see that concern, or do you see that there needs to be a civil commitment or some other options? Because that constitutionality piece seemed like that was a big deal.
Yeah. So, and I think as Jared mentioned yesterday, a lot of this language is based on the federal system. So I do believe all of this is constitutional. But to your point, I don't see that as an issue because there are periodic reviews and the person can petition. So no one is in there unless a court has found that the state has met their burden. And not only is there a clinical need, but there's a public safety need, and they can't be served in the least restrictive setting. That is no different from the hospital. So even under civil commitment, someone could technically be under a civil commitment forever. It's not about the length of time, it's about the needs of the person. And so this is the same. It's every so often, just like in the mental health context, you review the person's needs, see what's changed and what's hasn't, and then the court makes the decision based on that. So sure, it could be, that's never the goal, but it's so individual and really depends on what the person needs. So I would say it's not inconsistent with what we do now. It just is in a little different context.
And you can answer one more question.
Yes,
because I was curious about River Valley.
Yes.
You mentioned that, like,
Not.
That's not fitting this need. Are they serving folks who are under, pending charges, and like, that's not, if you can just talk more about that
absolutely.
And say how that is or
Yes.
isn't fitting this.
Absolutely. So for those who don't know what River Valley is, it's our locked secure residential. It is DMH run. It's the only locked residential in Vermont. It is 16 beds. It's where the old Woodside was. So that is a high level of care. It is not a hospital level of care. It's licensed as a therapeutic community residence under Dale. It is for individuals who no longer meet hospital level of care, but continue to need 24/7 mental health care in a secure setting. So it is staffed 24/7 by nursing, and psychiatry is always on call. So it's a pretty high intensive level of services. It's not a forensic facility. However, just like our hospital system, we do have folks in there that could at times be considered forensic, that are in the criminal justice system, because DMH we don't place based on where you came from, or the criminal court or the civil court. We treat you based on your needs. And so all over our system, both inpatient and residential and out in the community, all these folks are mixed together really based on their needs. So yes, not necessarily this level. It's possible. And if it were the case that someone Right now we probably have, I'm trying to think of, we do have a couple folks that I would say are considered or not competent would be in the criminal justice system. I think those are lower level charges, but assuming they would, it's something the court could consider in the least restrictive options. Like, is Middlesex an option? River Valley used to be Middlesex. Is it an option? The court could consider that. But again, there's a pretty small number of beds, and those are really reserved for just the folks that really need that level of care. It's generally folks that are coming from a level 1 hospital. So those are the hospital beds reserved for the highest acuity, who just aren't quite ready to go into the community, and we need to give them some more stability. The goal of River Valley is to prepare people for the community. They do a lot of field trips. They do a lot of learning how to manage money and cook and do all the things they need to do to be able to be successful in the community. Does that kind of answer your question?
Follow-up question on that. Why can't River Valley be the forensic facility?
It would, if the legislature made the decision to use general fund dollars to pay.
We would lose Medicaid if we had it as a forensic facility?
You would lose Medicaid, yeah. And, there's a benefit to being licensed the way it is, right? Like it's not designed, because if you made it a forensic facility, which has a very different, competency restoration, and those goals are very different than the individuals we're serving now, which are really individuals who, are not necessarily involved with the criminal justice system. And the focus really is to how do we get them to get to where they need to be in the community. And so you take away those beds. There's not extra beds at River Valley. And you can't just have some beds forensic and some beds not. The whole facility will lose its certification. So.
Harder than Ian.
So where else could this be housed?
Currently, the administration believes this is the best option at the moment. It doesn't mean that the legislature couldn't think about alternatives, but right now this is the alternative that the administration believes is best.
Okay. Would it be CMS certified?
No, corrections are not.
Okay.
Can you explain it?
Well, that's the certification for the other.
Right. But it's not a hospital. This isn't a hospital level of care.
Would it become a specialized designated agency? What licensing, who's overseeing it? What accreditation is it?
So I think that this is one of those questions where, when we are ideally this summer really focusing on what this facility is going to look like and working on rulemaking, that one of the final amendments to come out of the Senate created some pretty specific items that they wanted to see in rulemaking, which was really around kind of that level of care and what it was going to look like and staffing. And so those are all decisions that when those discussions are being had, that those decisions would be talked about. I don't know yet, because again, we're still in the, who are we talking about, not in the actual planning phase.
So in the sort of best practices stuff that you ended up researching, where did they suggest that these be housed?
They didn't suggest a location because every state does it differently, right? Some states do them in corrections. Some states have standalone. I think one of the things to remember, and I talked about this a little bit in corrections and institutions this morning, is that we have no forensic system of care in Vermont. None. We've never had one. Every other state I know of does. And those are much bigger systems because they are dealing with anyone coming in through the criminal justice system. So you're talking misdemeanors and felonies. And so they have whole systems built. And so when they have standalone facilities, it's because they have a lot of people that they're doing this for. And so we are not suggesting that we create a big, so we have in the past, but this is really a narrow subset of 3 to 5 people a year. And if you start to separate them out, you're essentially putting them in isolation, right? And you're denying them access to services because it's such a small population. One of the things about Vermont is just our economy of scale.
So given New York, New Hampshire, and Massachusetts have these programs,
did the department look at an option of contracting out with any or all of the states?
I have not been a part of conversations about contracting with other states. I don't know if that's been considered.
And I'm wondering, because one of the things that we heard a lot that I've been referencing on Mental Health Day was the designated agencies working with some of the folks on the orders of non-hospitalization and feeling like the person needs more than they're able to provide. And sort of that tension with Department of Mental Health. I'm wondering if there's any data on how often you're asked to revoke the order of non-hospitalization and how often that's granted. Like, I don't have any sense of the numbers.
I don't.
Okay.
We could look at it. I will say, though, that I don't know that we have data that's going to capture the conversations that are happening, right? So these are constant conversations. Our care management team, again, this is what they do. This is literally their job, is to make sure that everyone under our custody is receiving care, that they're checking in, that they know what's going on. There is an inherent tension between serving people in the community and serving people in locked settings. It is incredibly challenging to serve some folks in the community. I think the DAs do a great job and
With what they have.
And sometimes there is a disagreement because we cannot put someone in the hospital who doesn't meet hospitalization criteria. And that's what we look at. But that doesn't mean that the person isn't hard to manage in the community or they wish there was more structures around them. And so there is that inherent tension.
And there still is a need to more adequately provide funding to provide services for people that need more intensive outpatient kind of services, right? Like people aren't like, we have not fully funded the continuum of community options either, right? In addition to not having the forensic facility.
I think that we put forward the best budget we can every year and try to focus on always utilizing our funding as strategically and with the most impact as possible. Everyone can always improve. There's always improvements to the system. We are always kind of looking at what are new and novel ways to approach community-based treatment. We put a lot of focus on 988, mobile crisis, meeting people where they're at. The goal is to people never to meet this level of care. And so we do put a lot of time and effort into that, and especially with children's services. So sure, I think always things could be improved upon.
Yeah, and then Zach. Yeah, just quickly, it just helps me in this system to try to like follow an individual through it. So I just want to walk it through and see if I just understand. So I'm forming this as a question. So in the current system, for people that you said are falling through the cracks, it's someone who, charged with a life offense. Maybe they're held without bail under 7553. There's a question to their competency. They go through the competency evaluation system. There's litigation around it. Ultimately, the court makes a determination that they're incompetent. Then they are moved to DMH's custody,
Potentially, or Dale. Or neither.
And so help me, and I guess, when is it neither?
When they don't meet our criteria or Dale's criteria.
That they are a person who is suffering from a whatever that phrase is, and that they are a risk to harm to themselves or others.
Right. So DMH, the standard is danger to self or others due to mental illness. I The question for Dale would be their criteria
Yeah.
under Act 248. I don't know that. But say a substance use, it wouldn't be either of ours. And so our custody isn't an option. Dementia, I don't think falls under 248, and that's certainly not something that could be hospitalized for. TBI, also not something. So there, and I think Jared gave the example of the person who was deaf. I mean, we see all sorts of reasons why someone's incompetent. And so really the only options for custody are DMH or Dale. Dale is solely community-based and DMH is majority community-based.
And by community-based, you mean the ONH?
Yep.
Yeah. And so do you think that this bill is capturing like the majority of people that this will capture? I use capture more like,
Encompass.
yes, thank you. His capture feels weird.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
prison component, yes, encompasses, thank you. People who are going to be kind of that third option that don't. And I asked just because before you answer, it's just that if it's not the majority of those people, and the majority is actually people who do go into DMH and then they are either hospitalized for a period of time and then go into non-hospitalization, or they go hospitalization and then they go River Valley, then I'm sort of like, does it actually make sense for this to be going to DOC?
Yes, I do think so. And I think while very different, the accountability court is a good model. I think there was this idea that everyone in the accountability court, or most of them, would have a mental illness. I think out of the 207 were DMH. Most of it is substance use. So I think there is this idea when you're talking about someone who's incompetent or chronically committing crimes that it must be mental illness. A lot of times it's not. So yes, I do think that the majority of folks are not DMH folks.
And do you think the 6, like we've got this 6 number right now, are you familiar with these 6 individuals?
Yes.
How many of those are DMH?
None of them are in our custody.
From DOC.
They are in DOC. Well, some of them are in, I think most of them are DOC. I think there might be 1 or 2 in the community.
And are they in DOC because they are currently litigating their competency, and so we haven't actually gotten to a point where they could go to DMH custody?
Nope. They could be folks that competency has already been litigated, or folks that if there was an issue or a concern about mental illness, it has been treated and it's no longer an issue, or no longer something that would meet criteria.
Okay, that's really helpful. Thank you. Thank you.
So where did you say the 1 or 2 were? I just missed what you said.
So DOC has some numbers that they were looking at. I know that we have a couple folks in the community.
Oh, in the community. Okay, thank you. Zach?
I just want to thank you for your testimony, because I feel like it's not only very fact-based, but it's very informative across. I mean, you've seen the previous exchanges and prior testimony, and our last witness is, always a character, and we enjoy having him in. But I think it's a great approach, and I just really appreciate the way that you've tackled this. The question that I have is really kind of going back to the exchange that I had with the prior witness about why does this belong with DOC and not DMH?
Mhm.
So if you can talk about that.
Yeah, and so I think that goes back to 2 things. One, this isn't just a DMH issue. It is much larger than that, and I think that's why you see throughout the bill references. Well, it had listed all the departments out. I think Jared's point of saying AHS makes sense, because really it's an AHS issue. It's an AHS-led and supported model. So we don't have the expertise to oversee substance use. We don't have the expertise to oversee TBIs or dementia or intellectual or developmental disabilities. And I believe that DOC's contractors or whoever they get, maybe they hire staff. I will say it's interesting too, I'm off a tangent, but BPCH also has contracted medical staff. It is you can't pay a medical professional on a state salary. It just doesn't work, right? And so there's a reason that we contract for these. It's just how it works. So BPCH, all of our positions are contract positions. So just because it's a contracted position doesn't mean they don't provide good, high quality care. But back to your question, because it's more than DMH, and because these are specifically folks that DMH can't serve, right? If we could serve them in the hospital, we would, and we've specifically put that in the bill. But these are folks that we can't. And so it's really not, you lose, I think, the quality of care if you only focus on mental illness and don't focus on all the needs of the individuals. And so we really crafted this in a way that says, whatever reason you were found incompetent or insane, we want to get you the treatment you need, whatever that looks like. And think about public safety, and DMH alone can't do that. It's just not what we do. We have a very specific mandate. It's not public safety. And it is only folks that really need that level of care.
And you would say that the way that the bill is currently crafted is not only a holistic approach, but it has the best interests of the impacted individuals, but also of Vermont communities at the heart of the legislation.
Yes, we would.
Thank you.
Just to follow up then to Angela and Barb. So how are we going to, or how is the AHS going to make DOC a therapeutic setting? I mean, what's the plan for that?
So that is one of those questions that we can't answer just yet, because once we've had, if the legislature decides to pass it this year, then we'll spend the summer kind of working on that and come up with a plan and present that to you. We don't have that yet because we don't know who you may want us to serve. We don't know what your policy will be. And, and frankly, because this has been such an ongoing thing, we're waiting to make sure we're spending staff time wisely. And so we want to wait until we know what we're doing before we actually commit to spending, because it will take a lot of time. It's time we're absolutely willing to spend, but it will take a lot of time to answer those types of questions. And it just hasn't happened yet.
Do we have the right timeframes for the rulemaking then? Sounds kind of complicated.
We think so, but we also, reserve the right in October to say to you, we need some more time. I think, the way the dates are crafted was to kind of build in some of that, because it will take time. We do need time to figure out how to do it. But I think having that report in October will be helpful in us having a real gauge on what we need. And then you'll have the opportunity next session to look at it and see if you have tweaks you want to make. So we think that October report is really the next key step.
Angela.
My question is actually pretty much a follow-up to what you just offered. And I understand the need to use staff time wisely. And right now, this feels like a pretty big leap for me. And I haven't heard yet testimony that inspires a great deal of confidence that it will get figured out. That it will get that, because I hear you saying that it's not just DMH who can serve the folks we need to reach. I understand that. But I also don't have right now a lot of confidence in the possibility of DOC properly serving the population that we're talking about. So I'm wondering if you have that confidence, if you have information that might, inspire that confidence in those of us who have to vote on this now with a whole lot of unanswered questions.
So I'd say a couple of things. One, I think what you'd hear from DOC and Will, I'm sure at some point, is that they're serving a lot of these people already, because at some point they're in DOC and they're getting services. So this isn't new for them. They believe they do have the capacity to do it. I think the agency supports that. While we haven't spent a lot of time talking about what it will exactly look like in the staffing plan, we have spent so much time talking about the concept. Is it feasible? What kind of the general outlines would be, and how would we all work together as an agency to get there? I know that we've heard a lot of negative things about WellPath. I'll say personally, that hasn't been my experience. The previous director, medical director of VPCH, Dr. Allison Richards, is now, I think, their vice president of mental health. And she was kind of Vermont focused for a long time and then moved up. So I think in the Senate side heard testimony from WellPath, and I think that made them feel a bit more comfortable. These are professionals, they're all licensed. They do this in other states. I think that corrections is an area where you're always going to see a lot of litigation. You're always going to see a lot of lawsuits. Is it the best place? No. But I don't think that there is a perfect solution. And I think that this is a good option for now. I think that WellPath or whoever they choose, they do these in other states, so they have that expertise. And I think, just like any other medical professional, if they're not doing what they need to do, they can become under investigation. They can lose their license. They can lose their job. Like there's always oversight over professionals, and our contracts have very specific quality metrics built into them. And I think when we're looking at an RFP for whatever we do for this forensic facility, all of the departments will be providing input about what kind of services they need to provide and what level of credentialing they need to have. So I hear you, and I think that's valid. And I think that if we come to you in October and you don't like our plan, you could always change your mind because it's not going into effect yet. But I think that we can get there. And I think that we can show how we would do those things as an agency. And I think we can address this gap.
And do you think that, I'm intrigued by Representative Rachelson's suggestion, about, our neighboring states and their facilities that are already up, like doing this. Do you think that the agency and the administration would be open to including exploration of that as an option to be included in the report back?
I feel like I cannot speak on that right now without authority, but I can ask.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
I don't want to get in trouble.
And my question might have been answered, just how you were phrasing that. This sets it in motion, and then the plan comes back before the legislature and has to be approved by before it moved. Is that correct?
Yeah, so we're going to have to ask for funding, so you could not fund it. We need rulemaking, which is a legislative issue. So yeah, there's multiple places where it will need to come back in front of the legislature.
Because my question, just knowing, like, we're doing something for the first time with this. It hasn't been in Vermont, and we're kind of unsure on some things. I think you even just said, like, this is not the perfect solution, but it is a good solution to start with. What are the things that we should be monitoring the data? Like, is that going to be part of what you present to us? Like, I feel like there should be a yearly or some report that we're monitoring this, because this will be brand new. And so how do we know it is working?
There is an annual report built in.
Okay.
Yes,
And you
because
feel like
I agree.
Yeah.
We need to look at that. I think too, the annual report is built in with what we think we're looking at right now. But again, because this is brand new, I think it makes sense to revisit if the annual report is meeting the needs and addressing the questions. The way it's written now, we try to think about the things, but it is hard. And I think part of this is being willing to kind of adapt and change as we go. If we see a different need or something different, we would of course come back and talk about that. We just really don't know yet.
Okay. I saw there's an interim report that's due in October, but
Yeah.
is there also reference?
There should be an annual report that starts.
4A, I think is what.
Okay.
Okay,
Yes.
great. Yeah. Page 13.
So I want to double back on the conversation around WellPath, because I think one of the things that has been very much misconstrued, and they've been kind of almost placated as like the boogeyman in this situation, because I keep hearing the term private equity owned services. And the reality is, and I think it's important for everyone in the room to understand, and also our colleagues in corrections, is that WellPath emerged from bankruptcy in May of 2025 due to a recapitalization effort from HIG Capital, which is a global alternative asset manager. It's not one of the vehicles that they do invest in companies is through private equity, but there's really more a direct lending situation of reconsolidation of debt than it is a private equity venture. So I really want to dispel the rumors of private equity, because it sounds great and it's a buzzword, but that's not really what WellPath, how they recapitalize their balance sheet. So that aside, I'm curious if you can kind of give us more anecdotal experience about working with WellPath and their professionalism and how you work with them in the past.
Yeah, and I think DOC is also very capable of talking on this, but I can talk about my experiences. And I will say just, I think it was unfair to say they were fired and then brought back and fired. So the state is required to go through RFP processes. And so we have to put out bids every so many years, and we have to look at what bids come in. And if there's a lower bid that can meet our needs, these are tax dollars and we're trying to be careful about those. So I caution into reading too much into that. So I just want to say that. But yeah, from the DMH side. So we do have an MOU with DOC that governs how we interact with them, with people with mental health conditions that may need our services. So there are DOC staff and WellPath staff that are, we call them QMHPs, or qualified mental health professionals. So those are folks that have been, and I'm sorry, it's hard. I feel like I'm not doing a good job at eye contact, that are trained in our statutes and our rules that we had do the first certification. So involuntary hospitalization is a 3-step process. And so we trained them how to do the first cert. And so what will happen though is they'll come to us first and say, hey, we think we might have someone that meets this needs. What do you think? And we can talk them through that. They can do that. They can do the second or the first cert there, so which is the second step. And then a VPCH psychiatrist will generally do the third. So there's lots of communication. We're meeting with DOC and their WellPath partners at least weekly to talk about different cases. We do already now have folks that either are pre-detainee or detainees, I'm sorry, or have already been sentenced, who at some point decompensate and do need mental health care. And so we work with them to get them to the hospital and then to discharge back to DOC. And so we're working with WellPath on making sure that when they discharge back, they have whatever treatment. We have treatment team meetings to make sure they have a good treatment plan, that they know what medications they need. So we found them to be good partners and always willing to kind of work with us. I know that may not be the experience everyone has had, but from the DMH perspective, we haven't had a lot of issues in working with WellPath.
Thank you. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, Barbara, and then Tom, sorry.
Okay, so I'm wondering about, again, other departments that could do this. Again, if somebody is not found guilty, having them be in the Department of Corrections is concerning, putting aside what their capabilities are with or without additional resources. So in looking at least at the National Center for State Courts, their best practices say that for most jurisdictions, behavioral health agencies should lead restoration of competency programs, with corrections departments providing operational support. So it does seem like if it were not housed in DOC, let's say it's housed in the health department or somewhere else in AHS, and DOC has an MOU to provide some operational support as needed for some of the people that need that. That feels like a way to deliver services that doesn't throw people into a Department of Corrections, when my concern in general is we already as a society have too many people going into the criminal justice system because of mental health and substance abuse issues. So I'd love DOC to more robustly provide treatment for those people that are convicted, but to not have them be the leading organization for people who have not been convicted.
Yeah, so again, I think I'd say a couple of things. One, remember that we're talking about such a small population. So we're only talking about 3 to 5 people a year. And these are folks that have been accused of committing the most serious of offenses. These are folks that do not qualify to be in the hospital. So DMH cannot provide those services. And competency restoration is, again, it's more than just mental health, and DMH doesn't provide direct services other than at the hospital and at River Valley. So we don't have staff that would do this, right? Again, I do think, though, that the bill makes clear that AHS should all be consulting in those things. DMH is a part of that. But we do not believe that we should be the lead because, again, it's more than just DMH, and we do not have the expertise to do this. It would be us hiring a contractor, right? And we can't hire a contractor for another department.
And I see your point about contractors. There were contractors and there were contractors. And I know that, again, private equity side, I'm not even looking at that issue, but some of the for-profit companies that Vermont has and continues to contract with have that track record. For Civic, some of the other health providers in the past. And that's different than contracting with a psychiatrist that you're going to pay X amount because you can't pay them the state employee.
We contract with a company. We don't. It's called Columbus. It is a for-profit company. So that's who staffs the hospital, just to clarify.
So what if AHS or one of the other divisions of AHS were the lead and again, DOC were a collaborating partner?
I think that's a question for DOC because, again, it's really difficult to have someone else manage the contracts that you oversee in your department. For DMH, I wouldn't want someone else to oversee my contract because that makes it harder for us to oversee. But I would defer that question to DOC. That's really a DOC question.
I'm all over the place right now. So I had questions whether DOC should be the lead on this or not. And you're bringing me back a little bit. And is it, if we went back to Waterbury, we had secure facility in Waterbury. Am I right there?
It was the state psychiatric hospital.
Right, but there was secure, I don't know if it'd be a wing or there had to be some secure wings or rooms to take care of this population.
So it wasn't a forensic facility. Our hospitals are locked now. So VPCH is a locked facility. All of our inpatient psychiatric units or hospitals that care for involuntary individuals are locked.
Okay. Who does the security on those?
Those are just staff secure.
Just
I mean, the doors are locked. So we have, I mean, at VPCH, we have badges and keys.
So, but it had to be some kind of trained people similar to DOC, I'm going to assume.
So
Because it's going through my mind that DOC is the lead on this, mainly for public safety for starters, because that's their expertise is the public safety. And then what was the name of the contractor that administers the care?
WellPath currently.
WellPath. And you've dealt with WellPath.
Mhm.
And has DOC dealt with WellPath also?
That's their contractor. Yep.
It's their contract?
Yes.
Okay. And who has the most experience in the state dealing with WellPath? Do you?
DOC, we don't contract with WellPath.
Okay.
We have a different contract with it's called the Columbus organization.
You don't have any big issue? They're gonna be administering the, lack of a better word, the mental health care end of it, because that's their expertise.
So WellPath currently provides mental health care services within the correctional setting. They also do dental, medical, they cover everything. Yeah,
Okay.
they're the whole medical provider.
That helps me. I don't know if it helps anybody else, but. So what? This is the first time we're building a forensic facility. This isn't the first time we've built something from the ground up, because after Irene, we rebuilt the healthcare system, or the mental health care system, which I see similarities. So I know it's not impossible because I was around then. And I was actually on some committees that did that. And one thing that, and I think you alluded to, that you think you have enough time as far as the way things are written in the bill, but I would make sure 110% that you have enough time. Because there was some things that happened back then that, and it was mainly around staffing that I remember that the two people that were the head of staffing said, this is how much time we need. And when that timeline was up, they came back and they needed more time. Of course, delayed everything. You can't open a building without staffing. So I guess that's what I'd be really concerned with myself is no matter what, whether it's staffing or building the place or whatever, just make sure you have enough time, even if you give yourself a little extra time. I think in the long run, it's going to be beneficial.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we will have a much better sense in that October report because we would have kind of come up with staffing plans and what modifications would need to be made to buildings. But you're right, we definitely don't want to, I started just as VP Siege opened. And so I remember some of the hiccups. So I think that's a point very well taken and we'll definitely think about that.
Any other questions? I just have one real quick. If you could get back to us or to me from Nate, just what states have forensic facilities in corrections, or, the corrections oversee it, just to have a couple examples of that.
Okay.
So why don't we take 10 minutes just to breathe before we have some other witnesses in on 209.